Hi guys, and welcome to Biological Sciences for Year 10. This is Activity 9 where we're going to look at sex-linked diseases. Now basically sex-linked diseases are diseases which basically has a recessive gene which is coded for on the 23rd pair of chromosomes, which is the sex chromosomes. Now just to recap, the sex chromosomes basically come in two forms. You've got a full complement of genes, which is the X chromosome, which is basically the long chromosome, and in females you've got two of these, so you're XX, so you've got two full complements of chromosomes. But in the male you have a deficient chromosome called the Y chromosome, where there are certain genes which are missing. So you get this large chromosome, which is your X chromosome, then you get the short one, which is your Y chromosome. Now, what that means is, generally when you've got your two big X chromosomes, you've got two alleles coding for the same gene, and then they will compete as to what trait comes through. Now, in the case of the XY chromosome, if you've got that large chromosome here, and then you've got that small chromosome, these genes here have got nothing to counteract it, which means that if that was a recessive gene, then that's always going to be coded for, because there's nothing else to say, hey, no, or dominate over it. So basically what you get with sex-linked chromosomes, it's because of a deficiency or a mutation which has occurred on the X chromosome but has got nothing to back it up or counteract it from the Y chromosome. Now, certain diseases where this comes across is things like hemophilia. This is where you have an inability to clot your blood, or colour blindness, and it tends to happen in most cases in males. It's very infrequent for it to happen in females, and I'll tell you why later on when we look at some of the genetic crosses. But generally this happens in males, and this is because the males have that Y chromosome which has got like the top part missing, so there's nothing to counteract it. So basically, as I stated, it's down to a recessive gene which is coded for on the X chromosome and cannot be backed up by anything on the Y chromosome. As I stated here, no gene on the Y chromosome to back it up. So hemophilia, as I've mentioned, is basically a blood clotting disorder. Now, a good example of people who used to have this was the British royal family. Back in Queen Victoria's time, a lot of the males in that family basically were hemophiliacs. And basically what will happen is you'll cut yourself and you just keep bleeding. So you'll get a paper cut and you just keep bleeding and bleeding, and you end up bleeding to death because there isn't an enzyme there necessary to do the blood clotting process. Now, the blood clotting process actually is quite a long, involved process. They call it a blood clotting cascade, and there's a variety of different events that occur in blood clotting, and one of the blood clotting bits that are missing is called factor 7, and what happens is you haven't made that specific protein which is coded for from your genes that will allow you to clot your blood. So as you can see, it's a really dangerous disease to have. So if you get bruised or what have you, basically you just keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And as we say, it's very painful, blood collects in joints, and it can lead to death. And yeah, there have been cases where males have died at an early disease, and more often than not, that what will happen is if you've got this disease, you have a blood transfusion, or you can carry drugs around which will allow you to inject this clotting factor, which will allow you to clot your blood. Okay, so how does it work? Well, unfortunately the diagram on the left-hand side hasn't come through as well as I'd like, but what it's trying to show here is where we've got the X and Y chromosome, and as they cross or move across, you'll see that you've got a male who basically is unaffected on the left-hand side. He's shown in blue. Then you've got the mother, who's what we call a carrier mother. Now, why is she a carrier mother? Well, basically one of her chromosomes, one of her X's, has this white gene. You can see it there on the right hand side. And the other chromosome basically has the blue gene. Now, the blue gene is basically the unaffected one. It's all good. But the white gene is the one which codes for that mutation. Now, mum is fine. Why? Because the blue gene basically counteracts the recessive affected gene. So obviously she's heterozygous for that disease. Now that's not a major because she can carry on as fine. Dad can carry on as fine. So when they cross, the various crosses that they can get, the X chromosome from mum can join with the Y chromosome from dad, which will make the unaffected son on the left hand side. So remember, X chromosome from mum, Y chromosome from dad. Now remember that X chromosome will have the blue gene. You can also have the X chromosome from dad with the blue gene, which joins with the X chromosome with the blue gene from mum. That will make an XX, so there's your unaffected female. You can then have a possibility of the X chromosome from dad, so the blue gene, joining with the mutated white gene X chromosome from mum. So you've got XX, so there's your female, but that female will be a carrier. Now, in the worst case scenario, what you can also have is that the X chromosome from mum, which is the affected gene, the Y chromosome can join with the Y chromosome from dad, which means that you are now going to get an affected son. That son is basically going to have that disease. So there's a 25% chance of, if you've got an unaffected dad with a carrier mother, you've got a 25% chance that you'll have a son who's going to have the disease. So let's go through it in a little bit more detail, and let's look at the H chromosome, so looking at the hemophilia chromosome. So if we say capital H is going to be the gene for normal blood clotting, and little h is going to be the gene for hemophilia, or the inability to clot, then we can look at the phenotypes and genotypes of what happens. And what I've done is to put a little animation together so that you can see the various chromosomes passing across. So for a normal male, what you're going to have is the gene for normal blood clotting on that X chromosome shown in blue. That will code over for the missing bit on the Y chromosome. So as a result, the male has got normal blood clotting. In this case here, we've got a normal female. So this is the female as we follow through on the cross at the bottom. She's basically got a blue chromosome for capital H. She's got a from dad, and she's also got one from mum as well. So she's capital H, capital H. So that's a genotype, so she's a normal female. In this case, what we've got a hemophiliac male. Why? Because basically what's happened is the X chromosome, which basically is the one coming from the carrier mother, has mutated. It has just changed. And you can see that it's got that recessive form of clotting, that little h, but there is nothing to back it up on the Y chromosome. You see there's just empty space there. So as a result, that male is going to be a hemophiliac. It's got nothing to back it up. That chromosome is carried on that gene is carried on those 23rd pair of chromosomes. There's nothing to back it up from the Y chromosome. So that's it. That's all they've got. So they become a hemophiliac. For a hemophiliac carrier, that's only to come across in the female. So basically, she's going to get one from one chromosome, which is undergone mutation. So there's the little h, and she's also got one chromosome which has a gene for normal blood clotting. The normal blood clotting dominates over the recessive. The result is that she's a normal blood clotter. However, in the very worst case scenario, if you had a hemophiliac male who mated with a carrier female, you could get a hemophiliac female. She would have to be homozygous recessive for that gene, which means she would have two recessive genes, which basically meant she couldn't blood clot at all. Note that in the hemophiliac male, in the middle there is nothing to back it up. So it only codes on that one chromosome. So if it's sex-linked, it's got nothing to do with a disease being passed, like an STD that's being passed through sex. It's all down to the genetics on the 23rd pair of chromosomes, and it's down to the deficiency of those genes on that Y chromosome, which means that trait follows through, that recessive trait then follows through. Okay, well, I hope you found that useful, There are a couple of exercises for you to try on activity 9B, so have a go at those. Basically that concludes everything that we're going through on with respect to genetics. I'll put a brief video together just talking about the argument for nature and nurture, but that really hasn't got anything to do as such with genetic crosses. So basically these last 9 videos really will hopefully have explained how you do genetic crosses. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope the exercises have been good. Please rate the unit or give me any feedback via email. That would be good. And yeah, thank you for watching, and join me for the next section, which is where we're going to be looking at DNA, and we'll break down the structure of DNA. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you soon.